Hello everyone. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. Today I'll be teaching about worshiping the one and only true God. Let us turn to the book of Romans chapter 15 and verse 4. That's Romans chapter 15 and verse 4. Romans 15 and 4 states, For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. Paul is the apostle is the author of the book of Romans, and he said that the things that were written in the past, like in the Old Testament time and the New Testament time, it was written for our learning, that we may have hope. It's just for an example for us to follow. Now we're talking about worshiping the one and only true God. When you go in the book of Exodus, it shows that we are to only worship the one and only true living God. Let us turn our attention to Exodus chapter 20. Let us read from verse 1 through 5. Exodus chapter 20, and we'll be reading from verse 1 through 5. It says, And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Verse 3, Thou shalt have no other God before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth, or that is in the waters under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down to thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Verse 5 said, Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. So this here shows that we are not to make any graven image and worship any idols. We are to worship the one and only true God. I have several examples I'd like to go through about persons who were worshiping the one and only true God in the Old Testament, and persons who were commanded to worship an idol, and persons who were commanded to worship a human being. Let us turn our attention to Genesis chapter 24. This is about Abraham's servant, his eldest servant. This is about when Sarah died. Abraham sent his servant to go and look for a wife for his son Isaac. And it shows that when he found Rebekah for Isaac, that he worshiped the one and only true God. Let us turn our attention to Genesis chapter 24 and notice this account on verse 26. Genesis 24:26 says, And the man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord. This is Abraham's servant. When he found Rebekah, he gave reverence to Lord. The Lord said, and the man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord. Verse 27, And he said, Bless the Lord God of my master Abraham, who had not left me destitute, my master of his mercy and truth. I being in the way, the Lord had led me to the house of my master's brethren. So it said that he bowed down and he worshiped the one and only true God after God led him to Rebekah. Also, verse 28 of Genesis chapter 24, it says, And I bowed down my head and worship the Lord, and bless the Lord God of my master Abraham, which had led me in the right way to my master's brother's daughter unto his son. So he bowed down his head and worshiped the Lord. Also verse 52 of Genesis chapter 24. And it came to pass that when Abraham's servant heard these words, he worshiped the Lord, bowing himself to the earth. So when Abraham's servant heard the words that he worshiped, he bowed down and worshiped the one and only true God. So this is an example to follow. We are to only bow down and worship the one true God, to the only true God, who is Jesus Christ. Now, I have a next example for us in the scriptures about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's a king, Nebuchadnezzar, had a golden idol constructed, and he commanded all persons in that region to worship this idol, golden idol. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refused to bow down and worship this golden image. Why? They know that they are to only worship the one and only true God. Let us turn our attention to Daniel, the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 3 and verse 5. Daniel chapter 3, verse 2 and verse 5. This is about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego not bowing down or serving to this graven image that Nebuchadnezzar had constructed and had erected in the plain of Dura. That's Daniel chapter 3, and let us take a look at verse 2. Here it says, Then the princes, the governors, and captains, the judges and the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province were gathered together unto the dedication of this image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So it said that all the treasurers, the judges, the counselors, the sheriffs gathered together in this province. Verse 8 through 12 of Daniel chapter 3 says, Wherefore at the time certain Chaldees came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Verse 10, Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the psaltery, the psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kind of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. Verse 11, And whosoever shall not fall down and worship that, he shall be cast into the midst of the burning furnace. So whoever does not fall down to worship this image shall be cast into the burning furnace. Verse 12, There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regard for thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So they brought a report to Nebuchadnezzar saying Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is not bowing down to this image that Nebuchadnezzar commanded all that were in that province to bow down to this golden image. Verse 16, 17, and 18 says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O King Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. Verse 17, If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from this burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refused to make any act of worship towards this golden image. And they told the king that they are not going to bow down to this golden image. Either if God don't deliver them from the fiery furnace, they're not going to bow down. But we know the end of the story that God delivered them from that burning fiery furnace. Also in the book of Esther, we have an example about Mordecai and Haman. Haman wanted worship from Mordecai, but Mordecai refused to bow down to worship to a man because he knew that God had commanded that they should not serve any graven image or any humans, but only to serve the one and only true God, to only worship the one and only true God. So let us turn our attention now to the book of Esther. The book of Esther, and we'll look at verses 3, 2, and 5. In the book of Esther, verses 2, 3, and 5. Esther chapter 3, verse 2 and 5. Now this is about Haman wanting worship from Mordecai. So this is Esther chapter 3 and verse 2 and 5. Here it says, and all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed down and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Verse 5, and when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, he was reverence. Then was Haman full of wrath. Said when Haman saw Mordecai didn't bow down and reverence him, he got very angry towards Mordecai because Mordecai refused to worship Haman. Now, there's an example about Jesus. When Jesus was in the wilderness, the Bible said the devil came to tempt Jesus and he offered him all the kingdom of the world to Jesus if Jesus do one act of worship towards him. But Jesus said to the enemy, Satan the devil, that we are to only worship the one and only true God. Let us take a look at this in the book of Matthew chapter 4 and verse 8 to 10. Matthew chapter 4 verse 8 to 10. Now this shows that Jesus directed worship to the one and only true God. Jesus directed that, give us the direction where we should where we should worship, who we should worship. So this Matthew chapter 4 verse 8 through 10. Again the devil take him up into an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and said unto him, all these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. So Satan the devil told Jesus, all of these things I will give you if you fall down and worship me. Verse 10, then said Jesus unto him, get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. So he told the devil to get behind him. And he is only to worship, we are only to worship the one and only true living God. Jesus was quoting in the book of Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 5. That's a verse we have already went to and examined. Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 5. These are verses that we read previously. Now, I want to go through the Bible and show that Jesus is worshipped about 11 times. And Jesus had never ever refused. He never refused anyone. He never told no one not to worship him. He accepted everyone's worship. Everyone who came and worshiped him, he accepted that. Not only that, when Jesus came into the world, God the Father told all the angels to worship him. Let us take a look at that in Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 6. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 6. Jesus is to be worshipped. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 6. Let us notice what God the Father is saying to all of the angels when Jesus came into the world. That's Hebrews chapter 1, verse 6. It says, and again, when he bringeth in the first begotten into the world, he said, let all the angels of God worship him. Said when Jesus came into the world, God the Father commanded all of the angels to worship Jesus. Now we're going to see that there are about 11 individuals who worship Jesus. Let us turn our attention to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2, and we'll examine verses 10 to 11. Matthew chapter 2, verse 10 and 11. Matthew chapter 2. Now this is about the wise men when Jesus was born in Bethlehem. And they went searching for Jesus. They said they was searching for him to worship him. Not only the wise men said they were searching for Jesus to worship him, but also Herod the king said he wanted to worship Jesus, but we know what his motive was. Matthew chapter 2, verses 10 through 12. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they were coming to the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. Talking about the wise men, they fell down and worshipped Jesus. That's verse 11 of Matthew chapter 2. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. So it said that the wise men, when they brought their treasures to Jesus, their gifts, that they fell down and they worshiped baby Jesus. Also, let us turn to Matthew chapter 8 and verse 2. Matthew chapter 8 and verse 2. Here at Matthew chapter 8 and verse 2 it says, and behold, there came a leper and worshipped him. Talking about a leper worshiping Jesus. It says in Matthew chapter 8 verse 2, and behold, there came a leper and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. So we see the wise men came and they fell down and they worshiped Jesus. Now here it says that there was a leper who worshiped Jesus. Now, okay, also we could turn to Matthew chapter 9 and verses 18 through 19. Matthew chapter 9 verses 18 and 19 says, while he spake these things unto them, behold, there came a certain ruler and worshipped him. Verse 18 of Matthew chapter 9 says, while he spake these things unto them, behold, there came a ruler and worshipped him, saying, my daughter is now dead, even now dead. But come and lay thine hand upon her, and she shall live. And Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. So it says that the ruler of the synagogue worshiped Jesus. Also, Matthew chapter 14, verse 32 to 33. Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14, 32 and 33. Here it says, and when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. And then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, of a truth, thou art the Son of God. Talking about his disciples, when they came to him in the ship, they worshiped him and said, for a truth, thou art the Son of God. Let us also look at Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15, verses 25 and 26, it says, Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to dogs. So it said that this lady, she worshiped Jesus. So she worshiped Jesus. So it shows from the scriptures that persons in the New Testament, when Jesus was here on the earth, that they worshiped him and Jesus accepted their worship. When examining the scriptures, you'll never see Jesus refusing anyone who worship him. He did not say, do not worship me. He accepted their worship. Why? Because he is God. Also, Matthew chapter 20 and verse 20, chapter 20, verses 20 to 21. Matthew chapter 20, verse 20 to 21. Here it says, Then came to him the mother of Zebedee's children with her sons worshiping him. Zebedee's wife came with her two sons worshiping Jesus and desiring a certain thing of him. Verse 21, And he said unto her, What wilt thou? She said unto him, Grant that these my two sons may sit the one on thy right hand and the other on thy left hand in thy kingdom. The one on thy right hand and the other on thy left hand in thy kingdom, that thou wilt grant me that. Their children, she worshiped Jesus, Zebedee's wife. Also in John chapter 9, verse 35 to 38. St. John chapter 9, verse 35 to 38. St. John chapter 9, verses 5 to 38. It says, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Jesus said unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. Verse 38, And he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. So it shows that this gentleman, he worshipped Jesus. Also, we could turn our attention to Matthew chapter 28, verses 8 through 10. Matthew chapter 28, verse 8 through 10. This is about Jesus' disciples worshiping him after he was resurrected from the dead. Matthew 28. Matthew chapter 28, verses 8 through 10. Here it says, And they departed quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, and did run to bring his disciples word. Verse 9, And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, All hail. And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Talking about after Jesus was resurrected, he was worshipped. It said, he said, All hail. And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Also in 28 of Matthew, verses 16 and 17, it says, talking about his 11 disciples. Then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee, into a mountain where Jesus had appointed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. That's Matthew chapter 28, verse 16. See, when they saw Jesus, his 11 disciples after he was resurrected, they worshipped him. Talk about worshiping Jesus. Now, we have example about Jesus accepting worship from humans. Now, in Hebrews chapter 1 verse 6, when Jesus came into the world, God the Father told all the angels to bow down and worship Jesus. Now, I'm going to two examples where Peter refused to accept worship from a man Peter refused to accept worship from Cornelius. Why? Because he knew that worshiping him was wrong. Only worship is due to God, the Lord God Almighty. Only Jesus deserves our worship. And also we'll see that the angels refused to accept, one of the angels refused to accept worship from John the Revelator. When John the Revelator was about to worship an angel, the angel said, no, no, don't do that. Worship the one and only true God. Let us turn our attention to Acts chapter 10 and verse 25 and 26. Acts chapter 10, verse 25 to 26. There it says, and as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshiped him. Notice what Peter says in verse 26. But Peter took him up, saying, stand up. I myself am a man. So it says that Nicodemus came and he fell down to worship Peter. But Peter said, no, 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 stand up. I am myself am a man. So Peter refused to accept the worship from Nicodemus. Also in Revelation chapter 19. Revelation chapter 19. Revelation chapter 19 verses 9 and 10. This is recorded twice about John worshiping, was about to worship an angel, and the angels refused to accept his worship. Revelation chapter 19 verses 9 and 10 says, and he said unto him, right, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said unto me, these are true sayings of God. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, see thou do it not. I am myself a fellow servant and of the brethren that had the testimony of Jesus Christ. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus Christ is the spirit of prophecy. So when John the Revelator fell down to worship the angel said, do not do that. I am a fellow servant of thy brethren. Worship the one and only true God, Jesus Christ. Also in Revelation chapter 22 verses 9. Revelation chapter 22 verses 8 and 9. It says, and I, John, saw these things and heard them. And when I heard them and seen, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel, which showed me these things. John said, when he saw and heard these things, he went to worship the angel. Then verse 9 said, then said he unto me, see thou do it not. For I am thy fellow servant and of thy brethren and the prophets and of them which keep the sayings of this book. Worship God. So the angels directed worship to the one and only true God when John the Revelator was about to worship this angel. But we see that Peter did it as well. Jesus did it as well. Jesus told Satan, get behind me. We should only worship and serve the one and only true living God. And we see Peter did it. Peter told Cornelius, that we are to worship the one and only true God. And we saw that the angel did it to John the Revelator. We saw that Jesus accepted worship. Therefore, Jesus has to be God because he accepted worship and he did not refuse worship as did the angels, as did Peter, and as did Jesus. I'm telling Satan that we are to worship only the one and true living God. And we saw in Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 6, when Jesus came into the world, that God the Father told all of the angels to worship Jesus. Just think about what has been said, what we went through today in this study of the Bible about worshiping the one and only true God, who is Jesus Christ. You can just slow down the video, stop it, and examine the scriptures and go through the scriptures and see that Jesus is worshipped about 11 times. And also the Bible point direction to Jesus as worshiping Jesus. We must only worship the one and only true God, who is Jesus Christ. Romans chapter 15 verse 4 says, the things that were written aforetime, these things which were written is for our example, for our learning, that we may have hope and comfort of the scriptures, and that we must follow this example throughout the scriptures. Thanks for your time and attention. I am Wenzell Deyone Martin. Have a blessed day in the Lord.